Hello.
Hello, Arne. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you too. How is it to be back home?
Well, I miss Japan, to be honest.
Let's explain to people who Arne Peder Blix is. You started as a submarine officer.
Well, the Naval Academy and submarines as a professional officer all the way up, clearly spending more than 1,000 days submerged inside of a machine, accumulated, of course, not in one go. Typically 2-3 weeks at a time, sometimes a bit longer. You get close to the people, you get super close to technology. You live inside of a machine, really, and unless you understand technology and people, there is enormous risk.
And you clearly can't have paranoia. So you need to trust technology a few kilometers under the surface. Without trust, you would be going nuts.
That's true, but we all fly planes and we think that's okay. So without knowing how it works, but on a submarine, we who run it, we need to know how everything works. On the command side of things, of course, I need to be able to talk to the specialists with a very unequivocal voice and clear understanding, clear communication both ways. So you have to have a full engineering education to be able to do that. Little did I know that that's exactly how we operate in businesses, particularly in FinTech, because there's binary risk in FinTech. So it was an ideal grooming. You know, Norway has a border to Russia, so we clearly have I've clearly been to Russia many times, with and without permission. That was part of the game. The good thing about Russians and Norwegians, they love us, and we are quite fond of them too, but they love Norwegians because they typically say, we have never been to war with Norway, and therefore they're fine with us being part of NATO. That's how they think anyway. So that was a very important period of my life, and then I started in the DME Classification Society, same as Germanische Lloyd and Lloyd's Register ABS. So those who don't know what the Classification Society is, if you know what Big Four is, like EY, Deloitte, PwC, and KPMG. The classification societies does somewhat the same for shipping, for classification of equipment, but also management systems and competence building, which was my forte, ISO certification, that sort of thing. So I lived in Manila, I lived in Panama, I lived in Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York, but I was a lot in Japan when I lived in Manila, and I got my early footsteps and trust with the Japanese culture. But I had already met the Japanese culture in 1982, when I was there as an 11-year-old kid on a Children International Summer Village, summer camp type of thing for kids, 4 kids from each country, typically 17 countries participated, and 8 weeks in Japan when you're 11 without your parents, it changes you. And I love the country, I love the people, I love the values, the respect, the honor, the trust code. And I think it's wonderful to work with Japanese. And it sings well with the Germanic culture and with the Nordic culture, for sure.
So where do you see the parallels from a cultural perspective?
It's a social democratic thinking. And there is trust and there's certain openness. In Norway, it's very transparent. We have other similar values that are very similar, and we have the same challenge in society. Japan is just a bit ahead with the age challenges, and therefore also heavy technology and fintech wise, cashless wise. Norway has jumped a couple of other steps in a different direction. Japan is very much on cash, but there's definitely similarities. There's a huge language barrier, unfortunately. Once you somehow are able to penetrate the language barrier, I find the people to be extremely easy to build trust with if you do it in the right way. Which is just think how Norway used to be and how the Nordics used to be, how we treated each other with respect and with in the Hochdeutsch, in High German language, when you really put on the really polite style, that conveys well, I believe, in Japan. And I sort of miss it here in the Nordics. We should have kept it like that.
You think it got lost in Europe?
A bit, yes. And I think it's a pity because it is less convenient for the have-nots. The have-nots are the ones who suffer the most from this flattening because in Japan, there's still honor and respect, even though there's big social distance. So they're very good at respecting each other as individuals, as human beings. And that is particularly compelling, I think. Yeah, I just came from a lunch here today, and as the most natural thing, I collect my things at the cafe to put in the cleaner store as a guest. And the Norwegian guests and my fellow lunch guests, they were looking at me, "What are you doing?" Well, this is normal in Japan. So yes.
You have 2 weeks in Japan. What are your impressions that you're taking away from that? What surprised you the most, and where do you see the biggest opportunity from a technology fintech perspective?
To answer that, I'll just give you a quick color of how I know this. So I spent all these years in shipping, and then in the shipping industry on the ship owners side, ship owners association side in the UN from the Norwegian perspective. And then I connected with a lot of Japanese ship owners during this time and the Japanese Ship Owner Association and close ties. And then I transcended into brokerage, so shipping brokerage, petrochemical gas, ethylene, propylene, butylene, VCM, and then of course I dealt a lot with Mitsui, Sumitomo, Mitsubishi, and etc. The trading houses, and then slowly it became more financial. And then I had a fintech startup, and that fintech startup, software as a service, from 2002 2003. Was not bootstrapped it, as you would call it. We never had the external capital into it, and focusing on equity-based incentives, accounting, valuation, and disclosure. So everything to do with share-based payments, stock options, share plans, share purchase plans, share saving plans. But the valuation, accounting, and disclosure of them, and including the structuring of them, which is global mobility taxation and a lot of rules, and it's very, very complex. And I did this on a global scale with the brokers and everything, with Nomura, in Japan, and a lot of other banks, and then a lot of other banks in the Anglo-Saxon world, if you like. And then had the exit in 15 first time, and then we sold it to Computershare the second time in 2018. So I've been living and breathing fintech for a long time, and during this time I also had another fintech exit with the Mea Wallet, which is tokenization of Visa card, MasterCard, and Amex in a cloud-based TSM, which is fully operational and have a lot of banks as their clients. Very good company. So yeah, with that as a background, I'm part of the fintech society globally, and now also with blockchain, and of course carefully dipping my toes into the digital assets. But I work a lot with the CBDCs, central banks, decentralized currency projects. Main focus is deep tech for me. I have reinvested and I have my own portfolio of tech companies, deep tech, AI, 5G, platform technologies. Some are more on the fintech side and some are more on the operating system side and IoT side. So typically just reconstructing my submarine with all kinds of technology. And with technology, there's people and there's culture and etc. Then going to Japan, to your question. It seems slightly early days, which is natural because Japan has always had lifetime employment as the norm, or at least a gold watch of 25 years, or long relations and no sudden change. And for many, many years, and still today, the stigma around entrepreneurship, taking a risk, taking a chance, doing something different, has been frowned upon in Japan. But that seems now to loosen up, and I think it's liberating and fun to see. I think Japanese society provides a bit of a safety net, just like in the social democratic Northern Europe, which makes it less risky to take a chance as an entrepreneur for a while. I have a high degree of respect for entrepreneurs in the US because a lot of them who do it in the US, they don't have a safety net. That is really rock stars. My colleagues from the delegation, they came a bit earlier to Japan than I did, and they did this journey through Japan to Fukuoka, to Yokohama, to Hiroshima, and etc., to the different hubs and visited the different incubators and etc. We only did it in Tokyo. 20 plus meetings in Tokyo, I think. Very intense, extremely fun to speed learn like that. And what I find is there's a lot of activity, and the ecosystem seems to start to play. Maybe, but still early, and that's also an opportunity. I smell, and there are some serious, very good fintech companies, of course. And I work also with some of the big fintech players in Japan. I know some of them really well, like SBI FinTech, for example. And everyone in Japan are now looking at the opportunity to create cashless society, right? One could wish, of course, that it was a more coordinated effort instead of everyone trying to solve the same problem in their own way. But that's, of course, how the free market works and should work. like in many other countries, there will be successes and there will be failures. And it is not always the best technology that wins.
And so you're looking at Japan from different perspective, right? You look at it from an investor perspective. You look at it maybe from the perspective of your portfolio companies entering the market. And then maybe also possibly, if you have the partners here, taking some of the companies that you have relationships with in Japan to the Nordics, for example. Is the latter part of the equation, or because it's so early in Japan still, you don't really see much opportunity on the third pillar?
Well, the third pillar, I have already met 3 Japanese companies that are interesting. So I think the third pillar is absolutely possible. I really do. I mean, come on, there's a lot of tradition, culture, history, and really smart people in Japan, for sure. The universities have always been class 1. So once the Japanese now start to work on the third pillar, we should really watch out for them. And that's also, of course, why I take an interest. So yes, both interest in the Japanese ecosystem and startups and helping them into the Nordics and other markets. And that's part of the business opportunity I see, because I can certainly act as a bridge, as an ambassador. And the other way around, of course, there's a lot of technology companies in the Nordics the Nordics is a bit too small market. So bringing proven technology to the Japanese market is, of course, very tempting. And that's a great way of getting growth. And I think the timing is very good for that. And it seems there's also a trust bridge and possibly with the assistance of some Japanese capital, so that they can also follow their investments closer as those companies grow in the Japanese market, and they can even help them. So the CVCs, the corporate venture capital firms and other firms, industrial partners, of course. I see a lot of opportunity. And if we didn't have this language barrier, we would have done this a long time ago. And now, hopefully, what's the easiest? Is it easier to learn Japanese or easier to learn English? I would give fingers to learn Japanese and be able to, because Japanese the language is an operating system between people. That's really what it is. Stephen Hawking said this many years ago. There was nothing, and then something wonderful happened. We learned to talk, and then essential part of keep on talking, right? And that's how we build trust, human beings. And therefore, when the language barrier incompatibility, that's like incompatible operating systems, right? So definitely we should work on that problem and see how we can lower that threshold. That will help immensely. So definitely my kids are hopefully going, I don't know how, but I'm going to try to motivate them to learn Japanese. I'm even considering, so here's the marketing, I'm even considering possibly moving to Japan for a couple of years for the right opportunity, because I would love to impart those values to my kids. Those values that are still here in Norway, absolutely, but they are still, I think, more expressed in the Japanese society. And I think we need to go back there. I think human beings need to go back there. And we can be easy and cordial, but we should be better at listening to the other party.
We're getting into macro political themes now as well, but obviously the public discourse in the Western world among politicians and the leadership has deteriorated quite substantially. And if we have leaders that behave in that way, we shouldn't be surprised that everybody else starts to mirror that type of interaction, right? That is rather disrespectful and impolite. And so we have a bit of a leadership crisis.
And we do. And it's, I've actually written an article about this, which I call Transcending the Maslow Hierarchy of the Need. And this narcissism is not good for anyone. We're sitting there at the top of our lovely Maslow pyramid, and we're very self-content at the very top. And the pyramid is getting more and more narrow, because we are getting better at converting people from poverty into working class. But the pyramid is still it stops at you, right? And it's very self-oriented. And then to the right of this pyramid, you have the rights, the alt-rights, the more extreme rights, the people with less hair, etc. And on the left side, you have the more angry people, the lovers, but also the anarchists and the revolutionary, the lefties. And this polarization, just look at America. It's being torn apart now, and it's hard to watch. I grew up with a lot of American influence as well. I've lived in the US on many occasions, and I've always followed politics there closely. My cousin is a production head in C-SPAN, to give you an idea. Trump, Clinton, and now Trump, Biden, you have exit Brexit, you have this polarization, you have Japan, China, these polarizations, we're getting people more angry, and everyone are looking at the politicians as our leaders. Are they working for us, or are they working for themselves? Are they serving office? To serve office used to be a very honorable thing. It's becoming a bit more self-serving, and I think everyone are starting to see that, and they're just human beings like you and me, and that is not good. So we need this, what I call the inverted pyramid, on top of the Maslow pyramid, which starts with who are most important for you, your family, right? My family, my kids, and then layers upon layers of peoples, human beings, plant, animal, and earth. You can be right or left. I try to be a bit more apolitical, and I'm more earth positive. And you see, this is where FinTech is super important, because having worked with incentives for so many years as I have been using the forces of greed in the form of equity-based incentives to try to guide people in a direction. It's like herding cats. And if you put the incentives wrong, people will go towards the incentives, not to where you want them to go. So the alignment there is critical. So how do we get the planet to get Earth positive? Politics, it's kind of not working so well anymore. Our democracy is struggling. It's not agile enough. It shouldn't be too agile, but it's a slow mechanism. And 4 years, 8 years, you need to change to change democracy in its systematic change. You need to have agreement over 8 years or more. 2 periods, right? And that's hard to come by, because people tend to think in 4-year cycles to stay in office. So what do? We can't give the world nicotine or heroin or religion. It's not going to get us to be earth positive. Well, some religions are focusing on that. That's great. But how do we get people to work together? This is where FinTech is important. We change the money. We actually change the money. How do we do that? Yes, this is a part what blockchain is about, what tokens are about, and it's really about micro-nudging, helping people to make conscious choices. So, for example, if paper bags are better than plastic bags, you can actually use money to induce a behavior.
So you program the incentives into the money and the use case. That's very good.
So all the tokens are actually different focus areas. It's a decentralization and a focus. So you have bonus points when you fly, right? And it's kind of hard for you to change between one loyalty program and a different loyalty program, right? And the tokens, the bonus points, are actually inducing your behavior. So as FinTech people, we will actually need to use the power of greed and the power of money, because everyone understands money. Long money, short money. Most people don't understand shares. They don't understand options, and they certainly don't understand pensions.
Yes.
And pensions are, it's not here right now. So, but money, they're right here, right now, every day. And we talk with our money, we speak with your money. That's actually how we vote. One day we like to buy this, another day we would like to buy that, right? So it's actually through finance technology and changing the money ever so slightly that we can induce earth positive behavior.
I'd like similar conversations over the last few weeks, right? Lots of the FinTech project companies are focused on removing friction and to make it easier to spend money. But not everybody is good with money, right? The same way that some people are not good with alcohol or tobacco or so. If you give it to them, they'll use it immediately. And if you're not super wealthy, then you might have a problem managing your money even throughout the month. So this lack of friction actually works against you. And there are a few startups that essentially reintroduce friction to the process by safekeeping your money, right? And they only give it to you the day before you need to pay your rent, so that you can't spend it prior. But that feels like a cumbersome solution. And as you said, as if you could actually program the money for a specific use, and you don't get 1,000 whatever your currency is, you get 300 of that already marked only for rent usage, then you can't spend it on a new phone or so in the interim. And that would make it safer, and for the overall financial well-being of society, probably a good thing.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. It's really a kind of a gamification of money. To be honest, we do sometimes I look at the world and I think of the Matrix movie. What do you want, blue pill or red pill, right? And to be honest, consumerism is sleepy, lazy, and consumerism doesn't make you stop and think. That's the dream world. And therefore, I wouldn't say that all people on the planet would enjoy this conversation we're having now. But Earth positivity, I think no one would be against that. Point is just like with climate crisis or with privacy, which is the other problem that I see. They are so big on a global scale that it's very difficult for me as an individual to do anything. So I'm frustrated. I see the weather is bad, no more snow, da-di-da, forest fires, etc. Or I see my data is being stolen. I'm the product because they want my data for this, that, and the other. Then the big data can convert to knowledge, and that knowledge is almost used against me as a consumer because they understand what my demand is, and then they sell that demand for a price. It's called marketing, but marketing today is actually hacking the human brain, and therefore freeing the human being with slowly helping them to make conscious choices that actually give them a choice and to gamify that. That's what you're talking about. And it's really adult supervision, and it's a bit of education, financial participation. And that's really decentralization of democracy.
And so if you go also further on privacy, I mean, we're ultimately suffering from how the internet was architected. And there were some compromises made. And when you connect whatever University of Berkeley to Harvard, you make some assumptions around the parties that participate in the network that are obviously completely different than having 6 billion people on it, right? As we have right now. And so since we both believe in technology, why can't we re-architect and bring this Web 3.0 vision to life, where we have an identity that the individual controls rather than the big corporations?
Well, this is exactly what the distributed ledger technology, AccA blockchain, is there for. And of course, I'm a big believer that blockchain is the fundament for a lot of things, not all. Now, you have public blockchains and you have private blockchains. Sometimes you don't need a blockchain because you can have a centralized database. So you need to understand those things. But blockchain can reduce the transactional cost a lot. And it can be used as the truth and trust where there is no trust and truth because it's transparent. So the thing here is, when you see these tools being deployed, I see a future where it's definitely possible to have decentralized identity, decentralized storage, decentralized computing, network computing. We're going back to that paradigm. And I actually am a co-founder of a company called Friend, which is a decentralized operating system, which addresses this very issue. And also an IoT effort that I work with, which is called Nornir, Nornir.no, Nornir, which is IoT, but it's bidirectional linking, no middleware, which is really various overtures of FinTech. Now, Tim Berners-Lee has also admitted that, internet was a good invention, but he wants to fix it. So he's doing the Inrupt and Solid projects for this very purpose, which are really protocol changes and amendments, upgrades to the web. But, the web as we know it was made for us to speak, for people to speak. It's not made for machine talk. So that's why Nornir, my IoT effort, is a real-time web, which is really an internet for machines. So that's peer-to-peer. So I believe in the future, we will definitely see people will do like nature. Darwin and the creators, just look at the nature design. They decentralize whatever they can. They only centralize what they must. So should we. And if I may, to give you a quick analogy for that. So here is the story about AI. Siri, Alexa, and Bixby, Assistant, they are not your friends. They can be friendly, they can help you with stuff and be very useful, but they're also collecting data. And the problem is If you take your phone, like this phone here, and as we sit here now, I can look at this one, and I have 4 times 5, that's 20, 40, 60 apps, plus some change down below, 70 apps. And most people can do this very exercise. You can download then the app called Lookout. I have no monetary interest in Lookout, so this is not a commercial. But if you download Lookout, like I'm having here, it says 540 apps are saved.
A bit more.
Where did the 420 apps, where did they come from? And okay, this thing here can on security actually tell me that. So here, I'm just going to read it. 44 apps access to camera, 46 apps access to contacts, 49 apps access to location. Oops. 26 access to your microphone, hello, 43 apps access to phone, etc., etc., etc. This is not a good world. So what's actually happening is with all these apps and all these, we are actually already decentralizing ourselves to a certain degree, but we're becoming transhumans right now. This is happening right now, not 50 years ago, not 80 years ago, not 2,000 years or 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. It's a very small time span where we're actually transcending to transhuman state because we're blending with technology. And as we do that, where are you going to store you?
We're talking about you and me who are not in the People's Republic of China, which always is controlled state and at the state level collecting all this data. But we in a free market society where we think this doesn't happen, you just demonstrated that you have like 400, 500 apps watching you that somehow most people don't know about.
Very true. It's a different story to manage 1.3 billion people and 130 million in Japan, if I'm not wrong. And in Norway, we're only 5.3. But to centralize somewhat, yes. But the problem about centralization in the digital world is that then control is very easy. And this is a democracy problem. It's a privacy problem. And the point is, when you don't have privacy, you can't have democracy because democracy is dependent upon freedom of speech because you need freedom of speech to have free election. So the problem in China is that you have the collective history of China has not been conductive for privacy thinking. So in China, it's for granted that Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, Huawei, that they know a lot about their users. And then they know what to sell them. They know demand. And if you ever read a book about Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, you will see there that he got Nobel Prize in economics, but he's a psychologist. And that's the interesting part because he discovered that the slow brain, which is the logical brain, mimics the findings of the fast brain, which is your instincts really, and the little brain. Blood sugar can influence your decisions, and first impression has a very big influence on your decisions. Because the logical brain tries to reason what the fast brain already has figured out instinctively. It could be wrong, but then you're off, and then your logic is also going to be wrong, right? So what he says is the human mind cannot recognize patterns deep. So that's why AI, we have no idea how it's going to figure out how to play Go as well as it does, or chess, and it does things we never thought of as human beings because we have bias. Now AI, we don't really understand AI, and that's the scary part. We can talk about that in a bit. The thing here is when you then use AI and systematic influence on you based on the knowledge that you might have if you have central knowledge and the privacy issue is not catered for, you can manipulate anyone, and the subjects will not understand that they're manipulated. So in the US, this is actually institutionalized by the commercial business models of the biggest companies, because the predominant 90+% of revenue to Alphabet and Facebook are marketing. And that marketing, I don't think for a moment that Sergey or Larry are bad people. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is a bad guy either. But, they are now sort of victims of their own success because the quarterly reporting of a public company, you need to actually beat your numbers and get the share price up, and then you're pushed to make more money. How do you make money? Well, 90+% is marketing. So we have to do more marketing. And how do we do more marketing? We do it smarter. So we need to know more what the users are doing, what they want, so we can market better. And then that's completely in conflict with privacy, democracy, and freedom.
it comes down to incentives that we talked about before, right? They're not bad people, agreed, and they react to the incentive that they see in front of them, and they lead them down a certain path.
Agreed. You can argue they're not in control of their companies anymore. The market is in control of the companies because it's driven by the share price. And they can't really change their business models overnight. It's not going to work like that. So how do they do that? So Libra, the Facebook project for their own token, I believe is what they look at as a necessary next step, because they will implode at some point, or possibly implode. I'm not going to predict that they will implode, but there's a good chance they will. Because people, just like the climate crisis, which you can argue in many ways, etc., but the world is getting warmer for some reason. The privacy issue will just get more and more important. Facial recognition and all these other things that are happening so fast. We are going to need our own AI, our own Siri or etc. But it can't be Siri, and it can't be Alexa, and it can't be these others, because how can you trust them? Because you have no guarantee that they have integrity. So the only way you can trust them, and this is the key, blockchain. You need to have blockchain as the fundament for AI, because in blockchain you can actually verify that your code has not been tampered with, that you have integrity. So blockchain is the fundament for a friendly, benevolent AI.
Let's talk about this in the context of governance and democracy as well, because there are different, I think we're obviously still in the early stages of blockchain and people experimenting with different models of consensus algorithms, etc. But when you see kind of some of the models that are being tried out, when we're looking at proof of stake, that's who has the most tokens gets the most influence if they actually participate. And then we have the same challenges that we have in our democracies, where if you have a general election, we have 50% voter participation. So if you don't stake your tokens and you're losing out, and you might possibly lose value because you don't get to participate in the rewards and the inflation, etc. So maybe there's more of an economic incentive of taking part. Ultimately, is in a democracy as it has been conceived a few thousand years ago, right, that we're using still in the same shape and form today, where everybody participates. Should everybody participate, or is it smarter to let only the elites, let's bring it back to the Roman centuries and the Greeks, right, the elite, the educated people drive the agenda forward? And it just seems democracy is in a crisis. How do we get out of that crisis in a sensible way?
Oh, that's another hour. Of course, I don't have the answer, but it seems to me in all cases, revolutions are dangerous. They're too fast, ugly, risk unpredicted effects, etc. Evolution is safer, it's slower. And of course, we have to go the evolution route. So slow adoption. Just look at how internet was adopted, right? It had this violent thing, and then and we see the same now with blockchain, cryptocurrency, and this is very typical human. We need to nudge evolution a bit, accelerate it a bit. Mm-hmm. So the answer to your question is, I believe in a hybrid solution is the bridge between the slow evolution and the fast revolution. And the hybrid in this case is the decentralization. Just look at Switzerland, for example. They are now voting more often, because digitally participation, we can vote more often. We can use blockchain to ensure there's no tampering of the election. Mm-hmm. And then we can have privacy, so we ensure we can have decentralized identity to make sure, etc. So we can take our way out of a lot of that and actually let people be more involved. And then you will have the blue pill and the red pill people. You'll have the sleepers, the consumers, who they can still be nudged, right, by giving them incentives to vote. They can, and so several tokens. I'm involved in many token projects where I'm a typical token designer, and token design, token utility design, it's really incentive design. And that's exactly what it is. And it's about nudging people in a friendly manner. And that's where you can use your token and earn tokens for suggesting. You can say, well, take the airline. So I should be a token designer for Japan Airlines. Just they should call me and I'll help them. So here's the tip, right? If they want to know where they should fly, They should tell their clients, hey, here's 100,000 points or whatever it is to suggest, where do you want us to fly? And the analogy in democracy, you get it, right? You can then, what do you think we should do with Tokyo City? Where are the problems? We'll incentivize you with some points to come up with some suggestions. Then the hybrid solution, i.e. the committee or the people who actually are empowered, then they have a lot of suggestions. And then they can prioritize, rack, stack, pack, and come up with a roadmap and say, this is what we think is the priority order based on your votes and suggestions, whatever. Now you can vote on the priority. And then even down the road, so then you get the priority, then you get the roadmap, and this you should do again and again and again, of course. Plan, act, measure, and reconfigure. And then, of course, you can even let people be incentivized to help with solving that problem by earning tokens for contributing with work, with code, with whatever. So this is where I believe smart application of token design, changing the money, you can create this hybrid solution for democracy.
I like that. If I want to take a devil's advocate view, then I would say what you've just described takes out a large part of government administration, where the government employees think that is exactly their job currently to do that and manage the process, and eliminate a large swath of middle management in government administration, maybe in the same way that ERP and corporate software has eliminated that in the corporate world.
I will actually beg to differ with this.
Okay.
I will actually be totally contrarian to what you're saying. Yes, it's very natural to jump to that conclusion. But if you take the mayor of Tokyo and his, that's another decentralization I believe in, is the decentralization. Running countries city by city is also a way of decentralizing and more efficient democracy. So let's use Tokyo mayor and Tokyo as an example. Don't you think that the employees in the administration of Tokyo City Hall and Tokyo to run Tokyo, that they would appreciate getting direct feedback and suggestions from their constituents? It would be a lot faster.
In the purest way, yes, but where we started the conversation was a bit that all of these politic things have become a bit self-serving. And so yes, maybe 50 years ago, I would have said the resounding yes, that's what they feel their mission is, and that's why they've chosen the path. For today's generation, maybe it's a bit more, I don't really care what the population wants, right? It's for me and getting them.
No, and that's why I'm saying hybrid, because number one, you can't make that revolution and just jump to a new system. Power will stop that. But on the other hand, you can help people in power with more information, and you can involve the people more by good communication tools and actually more involved in voting on things. And I'm not saying we should vote every week, but just say we had, as a citizen, you pay tax, you should be allowed to vote, you should be requested to vote, you should be incentivized to vote, and you should have your opinion, and it should be heard. So I believe technology can actually facilitate a much more efficient government, and government shouldn't fear smart contracts and tokens and token design and blockchain. No, au contraire, they will become, in the future, what we will talk about is governance of smart contract. That is what we will, so policy and token design, and how do we, and that's where the people in government, people in public office, people who are serving the infrastructure to run the city or to run the public corporate register or whatever, they will rather, and lawyers and accountants and all those who are afraid to lose their jobs because of AI, etc. No. They will work one step higher in the design and the policy and, as I say, governance of smart contracts.
I think I can get comfortable with that. And I mean, if you take like a standard governance model on the blockchain, where we have proposal period, as you said, everybody can submit the proposals, and there is a vote on the proposals, and maybe after the vote has been cast, there's a bit of a cool down period, so everybody can think about this and then possibly reconsider. And if you tie that into taxation, so basically get a tax credit for voting, and you have got a commercial incentive, that can all work nicely together. So I can see that.
I think that's where it's going to head. It's going to take time, and that's a good thing. I mean, we're still moving at a very fast speed if you look upon it historically. Even though we are living in it, so we're living in a wonderful time. I mean, fantastic time. It's a bit scary with some technical issues, and then there are some current issues right now which are making people think. But humanity has an enormous ability to adapt and overcome, and the worst fear is fear itself. Like Churchill said, let me finish with that. I'm a big Churchill fan. I choose to remain an optimist because everything else seems rather pointless. Conservative optimism, but within reason.
Before we conclude, can I just switch completely and go back once more to your entrepreneurial journey? The reason being that when you founded AccA, it was like 2002, 2003, I think you said, right? So right after that financial crisis. So it's about the timing of starting a company in relation to the economic cycle. And obviously the next crisis was in 2008-09. You managed to do that and then had your exit. We have a whole generation of entrepreneurs now who possibly have not experienced a downturn. And so two-part question. One is, what percentage, what role has the timing played in your success with your initial founding of that company? And when you now look at, as an investor at companies where you go in and help founders, is there more risk now at the part of the cycle we're in? And obviously coronavirus can be like the black swan that finally brings a bubble to burst. There was a Sequoia memo coming out today or yesterday that warned the cash will dry up very quickly. So the magic ingredients of being successful as an entrepreneur, timing, team, funding, right? Yeah. What all needs to come together, and in turn, what are you looking for as an investor?
Oh, big question. Thank you. Let me start with the most important ingredients, which is team. People build technology. It doesn't build itself. People build companies. It doesn't build itself. But it's people, not one person. It's a team. To invest in one person is very risky. So you have to invest in a team. That's called a company. That's why it's called a company. It has to be a healthy one. It has to be a balanced. So there has to be a diversity amongst the founders. Good chemistry is important. And as an investor, it's extremely important that we communicate well and that we have good chemistry. Because if not, it's no fun. And if it's not fun, do something else, please. If you don't like your job, change your job. You only have one life. So team is what is number 1, 2, and 3. On a good number 4, it's a good idea. But a great team can take a half good idea and change it to a good idea. A great team doesn't need a great idea, they need a pretty good idea. But if you find a great team and a great idea, now we're talking. But you can have a great idea and a bad team, forget it. Change the team, take the idea, or ask them who own the idea to give the idea to someone else. Then there's all kinds of other ingredients. But then the timing is essential. Yes, we were lucky in many senses on the timing because of the downturn of the IT bubble crisis. Stock options were very disputed and they were chaotic. A lot of losers because the share price had gone up and people had stock options, this, that, and the other around the 2000, 2001. And then when the share prices dropped, everyone tried to exercise their options. And guess what happened? They got tax for the high point from last year. And some of them even tried to borrow money to buy the shares so that they can sell the shares because you're cashless, right? And when you're cashless, you have to go and take a loan to buy the shares, which you have as options when you exercise the options. And then you're trying to sell it in a diving market. So you end up with exercised options, a lot of tax and debt and a mess. So the tax had to be reconfigured for this to the cash principle, that you can't really tax people until they have a choice to sell the share or keep the share. And so that, and then the IFRS, of course, which was the real wave for that success, was the International Financial Reporting Standard and the revision of the federal accounting, general agreed accounting principles, FAS 123R, the US equivalent for, so that's IFRS 2 and then several other subchapters, embedded derivatives in corporate contracts, IAS 32 and 39, that kind of thing. Anyways, those things were, so that's paradigm shifts that we saw and gambled correctly on. So we actually had the software that was compliant with IFRS for stock options 2 years before the legislation kicked in 2005. So that was very good. In Mea Wallet, however, I invested. The team was great, the technology was great, but the timing timing was wrong because everyone else were busy doing a wallet of some sort. And since I was a bit inexperienced doing it, that was my first investments, I didn't calculate for the fact that the investors, and I know a lot of them, they couldn't sort the good projects from the bad projects in all the noise because everyone were making a wallet. And therefore this clutter made the investors be very insecure and couldn't make a decision because we weren't able to impart the trust and knowledge sufficiently. That we had to turn around and change the model and do a lot of hard work and sleepless nights and a lot of worry and stuff, and then safely transact the company into a group of companies. Now it's back on its own and doing well, so that worked out. So timing is essential. And then to your point, what about now and timing? So at the beginning of the call or the talk, we talked about timing, which I think is opportune for Japan, the delegation visiting and what we have seen, and bridging between Japan and the Nordics particularly, I think now is a very, very good thing to do. And I also have a lot of investor friends and etc. in the US who I will also at some point introduce to the Japanese here because I see a lot of opportunity. But it's too early to think about the timing of I think you're referring to the current virus crisis, yes? Or is the crisis yet?
No, I mean, the market volatility clearly has increased, but we've been on a 10, 11-year bull market, which is an extended cycle by any measure. So at some point, there needs to be at least a correction. And I've been saying that probably since 2016. You shouldn't listen to me.
Eventually, you will be right.
It's not wait long enough. But I've been wrong for 4 years at least. So it's by the sound of it, you're still optimistic that the environment still supports founders and liquidity is clearly still there. And the cycle is not about to turn violently down.
Well, this is the great thing about pre-IPO market, right? It lives its own life, not in the complete suspension from the forces of the stock market, but for public companies. But still, it has a different volatility and a different capital right now, and the public market is extremely exposed to the fear, less travel, all of the stuff we're seeing in the news. We all know now that at least 25% slowdown of Chinese factories because we can see the pollution, right? And it's much less pollution, so activity is down. That's not going to come up like this. Now, I've been watching the world economy ever since I was a petrochemical trader. Ethylene, propylene, butadiene, VCM, those are the building blocks of society. And when you do that, you don't stop watching that later on because it's really... So I've been watching that market and the world market, of course, which is really driven a lot by oil. And since 2001, roughly, what we are seeing now will have an impact economical. It will, regardless if it just stopped today and vaccine or whatever, or if it stopped tomorrow, or it will still have a recovery phase. It will take some time. There's a backlog that will be needed to be accounted for. And I'm sorry that Japan is struggling now with the big decision. I really feel for the decision makers deeply that they have to decide these days whether they can have Olympics or not. It must be terrible. And the trickling of the economy and the consequences and all of the joy and all of the positivity that Olympics carry with it. I was there during the 2012 Olympics as a guest in London with Boris Johnson. That was very fun. Thank you, Boris. He invited a lot of tech entrepreneurs like me to come to London and see that London opened up for business, welcoming businesses, etc. And I'm sure Tokyo will do the same for businesses, to welcome businesses to Tokyo. I love to come. But anyways, I believe we will come through this as well. And for entrepreneurs, I would take it as an opportunity, because people who invest in startups or early phase, they should know that it's at least 5 years, possibly 10 years. If you're early, it'll be 10 years till you see those money. If it's a series A, B, C, you might see liquidity under the way in secondary markets, and you will see maybe an exit IPO or whatever. So then if you're in the seed phase, at least 5 years, your money is going to be stuck and they're going to be illiquid, But the thing is, they're there. And as long as the company is healthy and doing its job, the value is increasing, regardless of what the market does. So I hope and believe, and this is the thesis, so the funds and etc., they will have more capital coming to them, which is running away from the volatile markets. So I like to think this is an opportunity for startups in Japan, around the world. It's an opportunity. There's nothing better than to work for yourself, or for at least have skin in the game, to have a part of the upside. Confucius said this very good. Pay me and I forget, and then show me and I might remember, which is possibly a bonus or maybe provision perhaps. But involve me and I will understand. That's actually share-based payment. That's participation. That's actually stock options and investments. That's actually being there with the team. Then I will understand, then I will care, then I will put in the extra hours, and there is a lot of great value to that. And I will recommend to anyone to have a bit of skin in the game.
Couldn't be a better ending. We made a very positive outlook again. Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation. So we hopefully see you back in Japan soon.
I really hope so too, indeed. I just need a good reason to come. We can talk about that. And virus permitting, I'll be back very soon. I look forward to seeing you again for sure.
Thank you very much. It was really great to meet you, do this conversation. And surely when you're back here next, I would love to have the opportunity also for you to present to the community overall. I think people would be very interested and engaged to learn from your experience.
Thank you. I'm honored. It will be a pleasure. So we'll do that next time I'm in Tokyo. Thank you again for your time.